All right. Well, now Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I'm going to see if I can get Arlen's head a little bit higher up, or maybe he can on his. There we go, Arlen. That's good. We should be at about the same level,
Okay.
even though I'm sure each of us thinks he's a little bit higher up in the terms of levels. But at least when it comes to the video, it looks best when our heads are pretty much on the same vertical plane. How are you today, by the way, sir?
I'm good. I've been in California a little over a week now. It's been sunny and warm every day. And I've been used to, of course, the eastern weather, which was very snowy and icy and terrible and cold. So that part I'm happy with. But I'm also amazed at all the important news events that are happening right now, from Savannah Guthrie's mother, to just all the different, Trump's statements about nationalizing elections. I mean, they're just horrible. And the things he says about, what happened in Minnesota, or of course, nothing but lies. And, there's a lot of bad things going on. And I think it's not looking good for Donald Trump right now. I think he's losing popularity in almost every poll I've seen.
It's true. If I said to my wife yesterday that if the midterms were held today and they were reasonably fairly conducted and the counts were done accurately, I don't think there's any question that Trump would lose the House. The Republicans, that is, would lose the majority they can currently hold in the House of Representatives, and even possibly the Senate. I think Susan Collins right now is likely toast. That's what Chris Cillizza said. And he's pretty reliable. I think Cillizza, I'm not sure how you say it. There may be a few other seats. I haven't really been tracking which Republican senators are at risk, but she certainly would be the one most at risk. Also, I think Texas is actually in play, depending on how the Tallarico Crockett primary plays out. I'll be talking more about that tomorrow, Arlen. So there are a few glimmers of hope, even in the Senate for the Democrats. But the problem is that Trump is doing his utmost, right? He's going to do everything possible, I think, to put his very, very heavy thumb on the scale to keep Congress in Republican hands, keep Congress under his control. And that is something to worry about, right? A cornered rat is the most dangerous rat.
Yeah, I think definitely Trump's going to do everything he can to either win the election, or if he can't, doesn't look like he can win it, he's going to find a way to not have the election happen. And that's, I think, the scariest thing of all. I'll tell you how I've been watching, Trump's approval ratings for a long time, and I've come to a conclusion recently that seems kind of scary. And I'll tell you what the worst thing about all of it with Trump is. Looking at the approval ratings, his disapproval is going up, but his disapproval doesn't seem to go down. It stays around at least at 40%, which gives me here's what I'm thinking. It indicates to me that 40% of Americans are either stupid or ignorant because they can't see what's going on and they continue to support him no matter what he does. So,
yeah, it's very unfortunate. I think that's true, Arlen. There's a lot to what you said in terms of his very high floor. The ceiling may be relatively low and coming down, but the floor is relatively high. Yeah. This is an area where I think you and I actually have some real disagreement. I think, and I've been really trying to figure out how to reach some of the MAGA folks, people who post, for example, in Halitics on Facebook. And by the way, if you're not a member, please do join. And I've really tried to figure out how to reach them because I think a lot of those folks, some of them we've had pretty serious disagreements with. I've even had to not ask them to leave, but simply boot them out of the room. And I don't like doing that. I hate that, but I won't have the personal insults. That's my one rule. You can't attack people in Halitics. And I'm seeing that. But one thing that I've noticed, and I've always thought this, and I think it more and more, is that we on the left, if we're going to try to reach people who maybe don't vote the way we vote, have to be really willing to be honest and to look very, very closely at our own candidates and our own party, and not to act as though they're above reproach or pretend that they're somehow qualitatively superior. I think that when we are willing to look with a clear eye at the corruption that was so endemic in the Biden administration, when we look at the clear intellectual failures and moral failures of Kamala Harris and Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, when we're willing to call them out, I think we're much more likely to be able to reach people who are adamant that Trump's you know what doesn't stink. Because they're part of the reason I think we see people on the left, many people like Rachel Maddow or what have you, being so unwilling to acknowledge the shortcomings of Democrats. Maybe not Maddow, because she's a hustler, she's a phony, she's a she's in it only for herself. She's a narcissist like Trump. But I think many on the left fear, or at least Democrats fear, that any acknowledgement of weakness on the part of Democrats gives something to the Republicans. The problem though is that locks us both in amber, and we're unwilling to reach out to each other and say, yeah, my guy stinks. Your guy, I got to tell you, I think stinks even more. But if you want to tell me why mine stinks more, I'm willing to listen. Either way, we've got to find a different path.
Yeah, you've been talking about that forever, Hal, and I agree with you. The Democrats have a lot of issues that they need to address and acknowledge that they've done wrong, and that's going to be important. But right now, fortunately, if you look at all the polls about which party people trust a little bit more, the Democrats are doing okay. But yeah, that may not be enough, though, because there are many issues that the Democrats need to stand up to. They need newer and younger and more aggressive leadership. I think. I don't think.
Well, they need leadership that has integrity. They need leadership that's not corrupt. They need leadership that isn't a Gavin Newsom that tries to consistently split the difference and triangulate the way the Clintons did. I think that's what Democrats need. And Democrats also need to have clear-eyed critics who are Democrats, who call them out at every opportunity. And I think if we do that, that's what I do. I'm not a Democrat. To be honest, I just re-registered as a Democrat from being a Green because I want to vote in the Democratic primary. There are some decent Democrats running here in Maryland. But I think if we're not willing to call out our own side, Arlen, we can't, they're not my side. If Democrats aren't willing to call out other Democrats, they can't expect Republicans to abandon their own party. If you can't abandon Democrats, if you can't abandon Biden after he was full on for genocide for all those months, if you can't abandon Kamala Harris, now you vote for her because you say, well, the other side's even worse. But if you can't say, no, these people are terrible too, then why would you expect a Trump supporter to say, yeah, Trump's really bad?
I'll tell you what I think the Democrats have to kind of come together and figure out is how do they react to all the billionaires, all the corporations, the ones that are giving them the huge donations. They have to decide, can they win an election by, not being totally on board with those people? And that's going to be tough because there's a lot of Democrats in the party that just, are not going to give up on the kind of money that the rich people have and the donations that they're getting. But the people can see, what's going on in the special interests, and that could hurt the Democrats as well as the Republicans.
Arlen, let's say the Democrats make a decision for whatever reason, whether it's because they really believe they can't win. They say to themselves, these billionaires are horrible people. They are destroying our planet. They're responsible for ecocide. They're responsible for genocide. We want no part of them. But the bottom line is we can't win elections without them. If we told the truth about them, if we actually champion true pro-people, pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment legislation, which is what the American people say they want, if we really did all that, we couldn't win another election. So we're just going to go ahead and mouth platitudes and in the end be unwilling to really challenge the hegemony of a tiny number, a tiny minority of the American public. If that's the decision by the Democrats, then why should we support them? Why should we vote for them?
Well, that's a good point, Hal. I think the Democrats are not going to give away the kind of donations and money they've been getting that's keeping them afloat. They can't win the next election without a lot of money. So I don't see them changing that. Maybe there'll be some younger, more progressive people who will push the party in that direction. But I think, just looking at the polls everywhere, the Democratic Party in Congress and just as a whole is very favorable compared to the Republicans, mostly because, of course, the Republicans have Trump and have to deal with him. And then that's the main reason that the Democrats are doing okay. But yeah, they have some real deep thinking to do and deciding, what to do with the future of the Democratic Party. I think they're in a good shape to win the midterms, maybe the House, maybe the Senate. But, the future, who knows? But Trump will still be president.
Well, it's a ping pong ball,
no
right?
matter what.
Whichever party is in power, and Trump has said this, tends to lose the midterms. And a big reason for that, sure, people are skeptical of the, one party rule, and understandably so, justifiably so. But another reason I would posit is that both parties have demonstrated repeatedly that when they have power, they wield it in ways that hurt most Americans. They make things even worse. They make a bad situation worse. So we've got learned helplessness. We're the rats in the cage that whatever button we push, we got a shock. So we remember, oh yeah, I just pushed that red button and I got a shock, so I'll try that blue button. And then when I push the blue button, I get another shock. So now I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll push the red, maybe I'll push the blue. Hey, there's this new rat called Bernie. He's saying all sorts of really good things. I'm going to vote for him. I'm going to push that button. But in the end, even though I try to get him in charge, I can't do it. So now I'm going to try this Trump rat. And that rat actually does win and makes things worse for me. So I think that's where we are. We have to figure out a way to break out of that cage where either we vote for the blue or the red, and both times we get shocked. We've got to figure out a way to be able to vote for maybe the Bernie, and I shouldn't say rat, because the candidate who really maybe will make things, has made it clear they are on our side, at least in the past.
Yeah, I think the most immediate problem right now for the Democrats is the most immediate thing is to win the midterms, because if they could take the House and or the Senate, then they could really stop Trump. And Trump is not popular. Trump is
but what
very
about
unpopular.
but what about, this is where I start to, where you lose me, Arlen. Sorry, I get a little worked up on this issue. I get it. We want to stop Trump. But didn't we want to stop Biden? Didn't we want to stop Kamala Harris when she was basically acting as president? Didn't we want to stop Obama from his endless wars in the Middle East, Hillary Clinton from destroying Haiti? I mean, don't we want to stop that too? That's where I think you and I, there's a mismeeting of the mind.
Well, yeah, but you're talking history now. I'm talking the future. What's going to happen next? And right now, we have to worry about Trump. We have to worry about the fact that Republicans are in charge. But it looks to me like a lot of Republicans are backing down a little bit from Trump. Thune, the leader of the Republicans in the Senate, is saying, no, I'm not going to go along with this national elections where Trump is in charge. People are not believing Trump. So that's the most immediate thing right now, is to, hurt the Republicans, defeat them, defeat Trump. There's plenty of things we can criticize about the Democrats, but that's history. And I think the future is what we have to look at them, immediately.
Well, I agree. Defeating Trump is job one. But I would say again, that argument, what you're saying that was history. But in between 21 and 25 or 2024, after Trump lost, his first reelection bid, Trump was history. And yet all I heard from Democrats was, well, we've got to impeach Trump and we've got to go after Trump and we've got to prosecute Trump. And Trump is the worst possible option for democracy. And that was history. Democrats didn't say, let's move forward. Let's make things better in our party. Let's fight for working people. I mean, there were some glimmers of that every now and again, but in the end, Harris, Biden, more firmly ensconced elites in charge, just as Trump has done, although they're slightly different elites. So it seems to me if the argument is, well, we've got to focus on who's in charge now, it seems somewhat disingenuous that Democrats make that argument today when Trump is in charge. And I agree with it, actually. I agree. But if you're a Democrat and you're saying, well, the problem is Trump, we don't have the wherewithal to go after Democrats because we have to defeat Trump. Well, where were you in 2021, 2022, 2023, when Biden and Harris were doing terrible things to our country?
Yeah, I think what we have here is Donald Trump, who is very unique and very powerful and like nobody we've ever seen before. He's really mesmerized a good portion of the American people. And, so once we get him out of the way, hopefully there'll be a chance for Democrats to really look closely at, who they are and what they are and how their future looks. Because, I agree with you. There's much that is wrong with the Democratic Party, and they need to look closely at, those items, those things that make them, not make the American people not so confident in either party.
All right, Arlen, thanks for that. I really appreciate it. 240-242-5646. Would love to hear from you. Don't forget, please click like, please click subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I get a little vehement on this topic. I really do, because I so get how bad Trump is, Arlen. And I when I make the points, his supporters get so upset and angry, and they lash out and they insult. But I do sympathize to a degree with those who say, but you support, not me, but your side is doing all these awful things too. But Obama put people in cages. Obama was the great deporter, and you don't say anything about it. So aren't you being hypocritical? I have to say that argument does carry weight with me.
Yeah, obviously it does. And it is important, and it has to be dealt with. I mean, there's just, no reason for the Democrats to feel they're okay if they win the midterms. They're going to go on and do great, because there's no indication that they will until they make some changes themselves. So, yeah, I certainly understand where you're coming from now.
All right, Arlen, who blogs at thebigpicturereport.com, joins us. It's an Arlen Thursday. Usually we do it on Tuesdays, but we had some tech issues relating to Arlen's new equipment, and I think we got them ironed out. Everything sounds good to me. Arlen, you have in the past expressed, I think it's fair to say, muted or lukewarm admiration for former New York Times columnist David Brooks, whose last column in the paper ran, as you can see, January 30th of this year. You wanted to talk about this story, so talk about it. What strikes you about Brooks and his finale?
Well, I think this is very surprising. I don't think people anticipated this. He's been a very popular. He's very intelligent. I remember hearing him speak on the Monterey Peninsula one time, and he's a very powerful speaker. He's got great ideas. He goes where other columnists don't go. He talks about quality of life and issues about human beings that other opinion columnists don't. So, he's got a lot of talent and he's very good. But all of a sudden he decides, hey, I'm going to stop writing. I'm going to stop writing for the New York Times. And you have to wonder, what's that all about? Why? He's got something going good there. But then what you told me, that he was mentioned in the Epstein files, and that might have something to do with it, I think.
Well, he is 64, and that does seem a little young to retire from such a prestigious position, a position that not only in and of itself provides him with a great platform, but also he can use to springboard to many other places, to being a guest speaker at events all over the world. I understand that the Times is somewhat strict about the kinds of uh, dispensations he's allowed to receive. But even so, I'm sure he gets all expense paid trips to various places to speak. And he's the New York Times op-ed columnist, one of the most famous opinion writers in the world, and one of the most influential. So it does seem at 64 a little bit young to give all of that up. I thought he was a little bit older. You mentioned, as I had mentioned to you, the Epstein files. I do think those almost certainly are part of the reason he has some egg on his face based on some of the columns he wrote about Epstein and his files.
Yeah.
And then the fact that he's actually mentioned doesn't look good. I want to get into that, but I also do want you to address some of the points that, and do this first, Arlen, that Brooks made in his swan song, his final column for the Times. And I think these were some we had talked about this a little bit before when you were on briefly Tuesday, but I want to just put this on screen. I think you alluded to this. You had been taken by some of this. You mentioned he's a good writer. He is a good writer, and he has some interesting ideas, although I would say he's a bit more to the far too centrist for my liking. But that said, you can see this here. And you were reading this. So what do you take the possibility that he's just depressed at how badly things are turning out?
I don't know about depressed, but he's certainly disappointed. He's saying the American people in the past, couple decades just not, coming up to where they were and what they should be. And there's a lot of growing depression, enmity, and loneliness, as it says up there. And, so he's very disappointed with the way Americans in this country are headed. And I think he wants to try, to make some sense out of that and go in a different direction where, we work on the individual people and how they feel and what they're going through. So, he's definitely disappointed. I don't know about depressed, but he probably should be depressed about that too.
And I take it, basically share this view. You empathize with it. I mean, as do I. I don't think there's anything really to dispute in what he writes. I have some questions. I have some concerns. I have some issues with him as his columns in general and how he's responded to these challenges, but he does lay them out fairly, I think.
I don't think there's any doubt that this country is in a lot of trouble right now in so many ways. Things are going downhill. Things were a lot better, a couple of decades ago, even 10 years ago, things were better. But right now, especially with Trump in charge, there's just so many bad things going on. And, Trump is wielding too much power, obviously. He obviously seems to want to be a dictator. So, I think that David Brooks is right to worry about the country, and he's trying to figure out a way to help. And that's not going to be easy.
All right, let's go to some more from this column rather than my. You okay? You had a little bit of a frog in your throat there, Arlen. The water help out?
You know how it is, Hal. I'm not a morning person, but I'm doing okay.
I'm sorry. Wow. See, I paid the price. I cajoled Arlen. I really wanted to do this show with him. I really wanted to talk about this specific issue with Brooks because it's of great interest to me, actually. And I like it sometimes when Arlen and I don't agree on everything. But, this was a little early for him. So
I'm good. I
apologize for that.
No excuses.
We have become a sadder, meaner, and more pessimistic country. It's a pretty grim little description there, Arlen.
It's true. I mean, people don't trust each other. People are either on one side or the other side and don't seem to want to get together and, get some compromises. So, we're in a very bad state right now. And, what is the answer? I'm not sure, but Brooks would like to see something different, and so would I, and probably so would you.
Well, let me say what I think the answer is, because I am quite confident I know exactly what the answer is.
Oh,
And this is
okay.
a big reason that I have huge problems with David Brooks, because he is pretty good actually at diagnosing the current zeitgeist. I don't disagree with it, although I think he
Yeah.
does it in a somewhat facile way. But I just think it's so obvious that the biggest reason that we are sadder, meaner, and more pessimistic, and aren't addressing the problems that are causing us to be sadder, meaner, and more pessimistic, is because of massive wealth and income inequality. If we returned to the income tax levels that were seen in the 1950s, with a top marginal income tax rate of 94%, there were virtually no billionaires at that time. The stock market was roaring as much as it is today. I think we would be a happier, kinder, and more optimistic country.
You're absolutely right, Hal. Income inequality is a big one. There's so many people on the top that keep getting richer, and so many people at the bottom that keep losing their homes and don't have enough to eat, and all those other things. So, yeah, it's huge, and it's getting worse, unfortunately. Uh, but I think another terrible thing about all of that is all these billionaires, all these wealthy people, they're willing to go along with Trump. They're willing to, get down on their knees and do whatever to Trump in order to stay okay with him. The obvious example is Jeff Bezos, and he pretty much gutted the staff of the Washington Post. And the only real reason I could think of is that Trump doesn't like the Washington Post. So he's doing everything he can to be popular with Trump. And that's a lot of the billionaires are that way. All the tech companies are afraid of him. People in universities and law firms are afraid of him. There's a lot of fear in this country about him.
Well, doesn't that support my position then, that by reducing wealth and income inequality, by taking from the rich, by reducing their influence, their power, by taking most of their wealth away from them, wealth that we've allowed them to accumulate by very poor policies that they largely implemented themselves, wouldn't that address the very problems that you're discussing?
I'm totally in agreement with you on that, Hal, and it's absolutely something we have to deal with. But nobody's, as of now, willing to speak up about it and do anything about it.
And that really goes to the heart of my issue with Brooks. Is Brooks, like I said, he diagnoses these issues. He talks about the financial crisis, the crisis that resulted in capitalism, like he wrings his hands about it. But isn't he one of the major problems? I mean, he didn't say, as far as I know, I don't remember reading his columns, particularly in 2008. I don't remember him saying, hey, you know what, the bankers cannot be trusted. We need to reinstate Glass-Steagall. We need to raise top marginal income tax rates back to the levels of the FDR and Ike. We need to have a robust antitrust enforcement. Break up these big banks and these tech oligarchies. He didn't say that. He didn't say anything like that. So
no. He's not the one that we have to look to for answers, because Brooks has always been a moderate conservative type of guy. He's not a progressive by any means. There are people who are more attuned to progressive solutions like the ones you're talking about, income inequality, but Brooks is not the one. There are, we have to look at other people and see who who might have some access to doing some improvement in this country. And so far, I'm not sure where that's going to come from.
Well, does it frustrate you, Arlen, as it does me, that there doesn't appear to be anyone in the New York Times who is expressing the viewpoint that I am and that you agree with? There's no one. I don't know one columnist who talks about this, on anything like a consistent basis. Every now and then, Tom Edsall brings up I guess, inequality, tax rates. Every now and then, one of the African American columnists, Charles Blow, or I forget the other gentleman's
Boy,
name, Bowie, right? Jamel Bowie. They talk about it. Lydia Polgreen, but it's rare. It's not as they don't center this issue. They center isms, racism, sexism, but not the specific unraveling between the elite, the cream, the gratin at the top, and everyone else at the
I
pretty
think the
much
New
at the
York
bottom.
Times, New York Times does well at pointing out what's wrong with this country, but they don't really come up with the answers. And you could only get so much from the New York Times, and now, of course, the Times has no competition. Now they're all by themselves as a national newspaper, along with maybe the Wall Street Journal. So but I think the Times. I'm a fan of the New York Times. I think they point out what's wrong with Trump and the Republicans, but if you're looking for bigger, stronger answers, you might have to look elsewhere.
Well, I agree that, and again, I read the New York Times. I subscribe to it. I subscribe to the Washington Post, and you make a really good point that the Post was always kind of like the um, plan B, right? Like you would read the New York Times, and then maybe if there was something missing, there was a hole, you might read
Yeah.
the Post and hope to find it there. Now, with what Bezos has done, almost certainly at the behest of Trump, they're basically a shadow of themselves at this point, and it's very, very scary. Democracy absolutely does die in darkness, as the Post has been wont to say, and now it's to a significant degree. If it's not going dark, it's certainly dimming. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, they're the best we have, I suppose. The
Yeah.
Times
Think
is,
about
but they fail us too. They
yeah.
provide a kind of a little bit of a comfort. Oh, there's the New York Times. They're giving us information that we need to know, but they also are protecting, I believe, the elites, and it's and not presenting us with a clear path to a better place.
Yeah, well, you think about this, how Bezos is cutting the Post and pretty much getting rid of it uh, because it's not making money is one of the reasons. But this is a guy with $200 billion, so certainly he can afford to, give them a little bit of help. He's obviously not going to do it because he wants to please Trump. And again, there's so many of those people like Bezos, the Musk and all those other rich people that don't seem to be able to stand up to Trump. So I think that's a
Right.
problem we have.
Well, that's why we need a legitimate opposition party that's prepared to jack up taxes on these bastards so that they don't have. And I don't say it's not even to punish them. It's just because you can't let some heads get that much higher than everybody else's. That's just the way human beings are. I mean, if
Yeah,
you look
yeah,
at any society where you've had almost unlimited power, you've had elites with like sultans and emperors. They invariably act not. I mean, not. I shouldn't say invariably, but most of the time become cruel and torture people and sadistic and do everything they can to maintain their power. That's just human nature. That's who we are as a species. The only antidote to that is to keep people. I don't say we should all have exactly the same. That's not possible. And I think that also is a betrayal of human nature. But there should be far more equality than there is, far less
absolutely.
inequality.
And
Uh,
as you know, Hal, I've often, every time I'm with you, I'm telling you that one of the big problems is our election system. It's so distorted, it's so old, it's so wrong. I mean, you can only have basically two parties that have any chance at all. And, all we have is the Republicans who you can't vote for, and the Democrats, like you complain about, they're not doing what they should be doing. But third parties just don't seem to have a chance. And right now, the Supreme Court, of course, is making things so much worse by allowing as much money uh, to run elections as anybody wants, so that billionaires can now buy, buy Congress people and senators. They pretty much, the rich people are in charge, and that's the big problem, I think.
all right, Arlen, I'm going to kind of go off a little bit track from where we may have been thinking of going, but I just want to make this point here about Brooks. There you see, you talked about him. There's from The Guardian, which, by the way, I often have read their articles without paying, but I decided I was going to voluntarily pay them $5 a month because they're one of the last the last sources that I think are somewhat not completely, but to a significant degree credible. So there you go. Brooks appears in latest Epstein photos, and we've got one that actually used in the well, it's actually in that headline. Let's just go back to it. And by the way, in that picture, he's at a dinner with Epstein. He never talked about being at that dinner. I think it was at a couple of others. As far as I know, he never went down to the island. I don't know that they ever used Epstein to procure women for him or anybody else or girls. I don't know that. Also in that picture is Sergey Brin, one of the founders of Google, one of the richest men in the world, like Bezos. So it is a big club or a small club with a small number of very rich people in it. We're not in that club. And I bring that up, Arlen, because I just wanted to show you a quote from David Brooks, who was at that dinner. And I think this maybe is why sometimes you and I have slightly different tactics for how to get things done differently. But here's Brooks's column, The Epstein Story, Count Me Out. This is not an old story from him. This is just from November of last year.
Yeah.
And he poo-poos the importance of it. And one of the reasons he gives, Arlen, is that kind of a attack on those who want this story front and center. He calls them QAnon, which is, kind of a right-wing anarchy type group that he makes fun of it, says the QAnon mentality is based on the assumption that the American elite is totally evil and that American institutions are totally corrupt. Obviously a straw argument. People aren't saying that they're totally evil. They're just saying there's a lot of evil and a lot of corruption that we have to root out. I think the Epstein story actually proves that point. And just one more quote. I'm going on for a bit here, Arlen, but I really want to get this in here because what Brooks also says, he's always kind of defending elites, which is a big reason I have a problem with him. Say what you will about our financial, educational, nonprofit, and political elites. They are not mass rapists. And again, it's a bit of a straw argument. I mean, I think it's more that we're saying, hey, there's this web of corruption at the center is this spider, Epstein, who was a procurer. And although he says the elites are not mass rapists, but the elites really were very closely tied to this guy. And we see that from people like Chomsky, Bill Gates, Larry Summers, former president of Harvard, the managing partner at Paul Weiss, one of the richest and most powerful law firms in the country, just had to step down because he is named as someone who was involved with Epstein in various ways. So I think Brooks really minimized the depth and the breadth of this corruption in our society.
You're absolutely right. He's writing like nobody else writes. He's writing in defense almost of the Epstein's, the Epstein situation. He's more sympathetic, I think, than anybody else I've seen writing about it. But also think about this, that column that we're talking about that he wrote for the New York Times saying he's going to step down, he didn't have one mention at all about the Epstein files or anything that he might have been involved with Epstein. And I think that's pretty significant.
So does that, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Arlen, but maybe I guess I am. You have expressed, as I mentioned, some admiration for Brooks. And I want to overstate it. But does that disappoint you in him? How does that make you feel, if at all, differently than you have about Brooks? And I guess more importantly, how much you trust his writings, his columns.
Yeah, it makes a difference. And I'm very disappointed in him. He's a great writer, like I said, and I like so much of what he says. But his views on this whole issue are so different and bad than compared to everybody else's. That you just, and then the fact that he defends them, and it just, and he doesn't mention about the Epstein files in that column, makes me very suspicious, and I've certainly lost a lot of respect for him.
All right, there you go. This is from CNN, and I actually added the "so" because they said there are many famous names. I say there are so many. And I mentioned a few earlier, some others from that article or elsewhere. Two presidents, Clinton and Trump, obviously, Elon Musk, Prince Andrew, Josh Harris. I mentioned he is the owner of the Washington football team, as well as the majority owner of the Philadelphia 76ers. Katie Couric is in there, Martha Stewart, Woody Allen. Just a few. I mean, the list just goes on and on.
Everybody with money seems to, be on those lists, and it's very, very sad.
Yeah, it is. And again, this goes to my point that people, wealth, power, fame corrupts. And the way you prevent that from happening is you prevent people from becoming very wealthy or very powerful. I mean, there's, you're going to have a president, he's going to have power, but there are ways to, make sure in the Supreme Court, Arlen, you've made a very great point, has removed guardrails, has weakened the guardrails to prevent the president from becoming too powerful. Congress has consistently given in to presidents when they've demanded more power. These are all very troubling developments, and we've been seeing over the course of our lifetimes.
Also, Hillary and Bill Clinton have finally agreed to appear before Congress. Otherwise they would have been, gotten into a lot of trouble. And that's, I think, very significant because, what are they going to say? Are they going to say the truth? We just don't know. And yet Donald Trump is in those files probably more than anybody else.
Trump was in it. Trump absolutely is implicated more significantly, perhaps even than Clinton. I think Prince Andrew probably, we already know he was guilty of, having sex with minors, and almost certainly was not non-consensual to the extent you could have consensual sex with a minor. His wasn't. So it's all very, very horrible. It's troubling. It's horrible. Brooks is not, by the way, Arlen, more about the New York Times. And look, they do great work. They do great reportage, but again, that institution is also clearly compromised. Brooks is not the first Times man to appear prominently in the recent disclosures about Epstein. During the GOP dump, we learned that there was more about a relationship between Epstein and former Times reporter Landon Thomas, who had solicited a donation to a charity from Epstein. He had appeared in numerous emails with Epstein, who told him apparently that he had information about Trump, and rather than report that and try to develop that into a bigger story, which it certainly should have been done, Thomas sat on that. We don't know why. We don't know whether no one knows. And no one's asked Thomas. I could speculate. I have some theories, but we don't know.
Well, I think what also is very, very important is the fact that Epstein's files are in the hands of the Justice Department. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, all those pro-Trump people, and everybody kind of, I think a lot of people probably expect that they are covering up any mentions of Trump that would be, especially bad for him. It's just unbelievable that there's so much about him, and yet there's a lot of redactions there's quite a bit of redactions, and they're kind of talking about not releasing any more files, when I think a lot of people just feel that Trump has got to be in there more than he's been there, done more things than what's been shown so far.
Well, we got a lot of people watching the video right now, and I ask you, if you're checking us out, if you're listening live or watching live, give us a call. Would love to hear from you right now. 240-242-5646. Arlen, you got a friend out there in beautiful uh, not apt. What is it? Where's
Santa Cruz.
Capitola? Santa
Santa
Cruz.
Cruz. Yeah.
Yeah, give us
Yeah.
a call.
Yeah. Carl, where are
Carl,
you?
yeah, Carl. I forgot. I was thinking, Carl. Come on, Carl. Give us a call. I'd love to talk to you if you're watching right now. And Carl's not. I'll call Carl out. See, Carl is like a gentle soul. He doesn't like the back and forth that Halitics. Sometimes we have here, and Arlen obviously able to roll with my punches a little better. I always feel bad, Arlen, when I get upset, and you're always so good about it. So you can get mad at me too if you like.
No. But I'll tell you another person out there in that area is Billy Sunshine. There's a guy that likes to do talk radio. He does his own on another radio station. It'd be nice to hear from him too.
You know what I find frustrating, Arlen? I'll tell you what I find frustrating since I asked you, and I'm not going to wait for your answer. Exactly what I talked about earlier. When I criticize Democrats, so many leftists are like, turn me off and insult me and call me like a Trump pansy or whatever. I've heard that many times. But when I go after the right, I don't get, oh, great job from the left. I get from the right, oh, you've got Trump derangement syndrome and
Sure.
So it feels like you got to pick a side. And I say neither. That's what I say. I say neither. And that has not always gone well.
Well, you know what people are upset about is the fact that there is no other realistic alternative to the Republican Party other than the Democratic Party. So, people want to support them and do everything they can to help the Democrats. But like we both agree, there are problems with the Democrats and they need to solve a lot of things. And but again, they're our only choice other than
well, I'm going to push back on that too, Arlen, especially for you in California, a top 2 primary state, which is totally controlled by the Democrats statewide. You've got a gubernatorial election. When is it? Next year, or is it this year, or is it in 28?
I believe it's this year.
Is Gavin up this year? Is that he's not?
No, he's term limited, so he's definitely pointing at the presidency. But there is going to be an election, and it's probably going to be very competitive, as far as I know, in November.
Yes, and there's a primary, I believe, in it's a top 2, so the top 2 winners will duke it out in the general. The general, as you mentioned, is in November. The top 2, June. I just looked it up, June 2nd. So I am calling on you, Arlen, to vote for Butch Ware, the Green Party candidate in that primary. I think he is clearly the best choice. I have issues with Butch Ware. Believe me, he's he often centers what I call identity politics in a way that I find I don't want to say it's distasteful, but I think it puts people off and he doesn't really capture the moment, in my opinion. But he wants to tax the billionaires. He's for that surcharge that Katie Porter, by the way, has voiced opposition to. Not one Democrat. You've got Xavier Becerra, former U.S. Secretary of Health and Human Services, who I would possibly be inclined to consider voting for. You've got Porter. You've got a few others, Ian Calderon, former Majority Leader of the California Assembly, Eric Swalwell. All of them oppose that billionaire surcharge tax. Only applies on the second $1 billion in your assets. And they all oppose it, every Democrat. So I'm saying to you, Arlen, you do have an alternative, and voting for him won't in any way help Republicans or Trump. So I'm saying to you, vote for Butch Ware for governor in June.
I will commit to looking very carefully at who is running in that race, because there are a lot of Democrats that want to be governor of California. And I'll explore their issues. And by next week, we could talk about that if you'd like. It's a big one. I mean, biggest state in the country, California, and being governor is very important. And look what it's done for Gavin Newsom. He's gotten a lot of publicity because of that, and very well known because of that. So it's an important race, and I will check further into it.
Here's another name, big name, running in that primary, Antonio Villaraigosa. And he too, former Los Angeles mayor, has stated he opposes the billionaire tax. Now, I made the point. I get their arguments. They make some, what I think are pretty decent criticisms of the tax. The problem is none of them provide an alternative. No one say, well, we shouldn't raise the money from the billionaires in that way, but we should raise it in this way. What you really need in California, Arlen, is an estate tax. There's no estate tax, which is crazy.
Well, that comes from the Republicans. They just made it, the estate tax or the death tax, into nothing. I mean, they just don't like it.
I don't understand that, though. That seems like an excuse, because you have Democrats in complete control, right? They have veto-proof majorities in both houses, and they have the governor's mansion. How could they not just simply pass a law that does implement an estate tax?
Well, I think what we talked about before, Hal, is none of these candidates want to offend or put off any of these billionaires who may donate to their campaigns, and that's just because of the election system we have. And I agree with you. We should do something about the estate tax and lots of other things like that. But and we should see some candidates who are willing to criticize the big corporations and the billionaires. So yeah,
all right. Well, we've explored this. We'll talk about it next time. Maybe you look at Butch Ware. We'll talk about it next time. We did allude to, you talked about the situation at the Washington Post. It's very troubling. We don't have that much time. So Arlen, if it's okay with you, I think I want to move to what I consider to be, I think you're very troubled by, and I am too, the potential that Trump will somehow, with the Republicans, prevent legit, free and fair elections in November.
Yes, that's very important. And I think a lot of progressives are worried that if Trump looks at the polls and sees that he's in trouble, he'll find a way to, get rid of those elections, to not hold them. I mean, he's already. There are just so many reasons that he could come up with to prevent those elections from happening. But I don't think he's going to get away with it, to tell you the truth, because he's talking about nationalizing elections, and I don't think anybody's going to go for that. And it's right there in the Constitution about the states that are in charge. So he's not going to get anywhere with that, I don't think.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed, Arlen. I've often felt that some people were too alarmist about Trump, but look, he's got all that power, and he wants to keep it. And he doesn't want to have to deal with a Congress that's going to be obstreperous, that's going to start investigating him, that will likely impeach him. That is something he has zero interest in dealing with. So I don't underestimate his ability to try to remain in power.
Of course,
CBS,
he'll do everything he can.
It's scary. Here's CBS News Monday.
These latest comments are adding to concerns by critics that the administration aims to get involved in elections ahead of the 2026 midterms. And we heard in this podcast the president also escalate his baseless claims of election fraud, which evidence and research.
By the way, I want to stop it right there. So I wonder if that reporter is going to be looking for a new job, if she isn't already. She just said on CBS News, right? And that's CBS News, right? Because it's the Barry Weiss network now. She just said he's amplifying his baseless claims, which they most certainly are baseless. They're false, that there was something hinky about the 2020 election. I'm kind of think she had some guts to say that, Arlen.
I don't know. I think it's pretty pretty much all the major media is saying, that the Trump's claims about the 2020 elections are wrong and baseless. And I think there's a lot of those kind of statements saying, no, Trump has no proof about any of that. So I think she's quite safe.
All right, let me play a little more.
Is very rare. And he also placed blame on undocumented immigrants without evidence. Take a listen.
These people were brought to our country to vote, and they vote illegally. And amazing that the Republicans aren't tougher on it. The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting.
So this has been investigated on a number of occasions, Arlen. No undocumented immigrants are voting. Nobody there. If you're not a citizen, you're not voting. I mean, it's really that simple. And the Republicans have been desperate to try to come up with anybody who wasn't eligible to vote who did. And I maybe they found one person, I think. I mean, I won't say there were none because then I'll hear from somebody, well, what about this person? But it's virtually totally unheard of. And like you said, even Republicans, at least the ones who are in charge of the elections, like in Georgia, Trump has seized records there. That Georgia was a Republican state. The Secretary of State there, a Republican, Brad Raffensperger, he couldn't find it. He was like, no, this is ridiculous. Stop it. He's like, stop it, Trump.
So something very suspicious about what's going on in Georgia, and Tulsi Gabbard going over there and going through the records, and then they'll probably say that, oh, we found all these improprieties that prove that Donald Trump really won Georgia. But you also can't get away from the fact that he asked the Secretary of State, give me the 11,000 votes I need to win this election.
It's very frightening. So here is a shocking, to me, poll, shocking. 43% of Americans say that Trump is committed to free, fair elections. 56% say he is not. What shocks me is that there are 43% of Americans who actually, I don't think they believe it. I guess they feel they have to say it. There's loyalty to Trump. Maybe they're Trump idolaters. I don't really know, Arlen. This goes to that issue we talked about before, people who simply look at Trump and don't acknowledge what a threat he is, how dangerous he is.
Yeah, I think it's important. What I said earlier, I think the evidence is strong that there's about 40% of Americans who are either stupid or ignorant and don't seem to change their mind no matter what Trump does. So, but fortunately, 40% doesn't win elections. So that's something to consider too.
All right, Arlen from Kelly in the chat. You never have a perfect candidate. You vote for less evil. Kelly, it's great to hear from you. Thank you for that. I hope you'll keep commenting, but also call in at some point. But I want to respond to that. I've made the point, I don't look for a perfect candidate. I don't think Butch Ware is a perfect candidate. I would vote for him, not because he's less evil, but because I think he would actually probably, on balance, make things better. That's my ultimate litmus test. Are they going to make things or try to make things a little bit better? And sadly, Arlen, my sense has been that major party candidates have often failed that test, both of them.
Well, that's because the major parties, Republicans and Democrats, are so strong, they're going to push anybody else out of the way because they want to be in total control. And so far, it's worked. Except for, maybe if you go back to the Ross Perot election, but that's a while ago.
But again, what I'm saying here is my litmus test isn't that you're perfect. It's that you're going to try to make things a little bit better. And I haven't gotten that sense from recent candidates, although I was swayed in 2020 by people who I have who I do believe, I find very credible to vote ultimately for Joe Biden. And I don't regret that vote, but he was in many ways, I think, a very problematic president as well.
Well,
all right. 2402. Go ahead, Arlen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, if you really want a candidate who's going to agree with you, I think the only real solution is for you to run for office.
Well, I've thought about it. I certainly have, but I'm not that wealthy. I mean, I have enough for myself and my family, but I don't want to put their future in jeopardy. And it's very expensive to run for office. And also, I don't see myself winning. So, I am somewhat I have some self-awareness, or
Just a thought, just a thought.
maybe if I was 25 and circumstances were different. That's why I actually, when I went out to California in 2005 to buy the radio station, that my sense was that is the way I can be most effective in making a difference, not running for office. I had people say, well, maybe you should run for office, but I thought media, having a truly progressive media outlet would be a better way for me to make a difference, a more effective way. I think there were some wins, but one small radio stick is just not enough. Was not enough.
Yeah, for a while it was good. Everything, the news was good from the radio station, but you also ran into the media has just had changed around the time that you've been there a few years, and talk radio, progressive talk radio was not as important as it was when you first started it.
And it never really took off. I mean, I know there are people talk about, how powerful and influential Stephanie Miller is, Tom Hartman. And you made the point, Arlen. I thought Hartman's online audience was bigger than it is. It's not that big. He's not really that influential on online. Miller less so, and their radio audiences are obviously in decline, as all radio is. So it's progressive talk had its, small bore victories, but ultimately I think clearly.
Yeah, the progressive view is gets the most numbers on social media. There are people that we don't listen to. They're getting lots and lots of really big audiences. So, things are changing fast, and social media seems to be the way that, people get their news and get their information.
All right. From the New York Times, this was another article you were interested in discussing. Trump could interfere with the midterm elections. You can help defend them. Can one really defend them if the government is going to try to seize the election equipment? And
yeah, of course, we have to make sure that Republicans don't interfere with these elections. And I'm sure people will be watching very carefully to make sure that they don't. So 2026, the midterm election looks good, but it's a long ways away still.
Yeah, I thought this was true, what the New York Times actually wrote here. In truth, American elections have never been more reliable or accessible. I think that's beyond argument. I mean, every observer, whatever, the counts seem to be, consistently unchallengeable. And we do have paper trails now. I was very concerned in the early 2000s that George W. Bush might have been elected through the machinations of election machine owners. But that fear seems to have largely evaporated because we do have paper trails. There are audits done. And consistently, the results that are announced match what the audits say they should.
And you probably remember how that Trump made many attempts to go through the courts to say that the elections were bad, were dishonest or whatever, and he lost every single one. He had about 60. I think he may have won one, but he did not make a good case that there was anything wrong with the elections.
Yeah, I want to show you a picture here. This is from the 1948 congressional election. This is Lyndon Baines Johnson, apparently his private collection. Let me see if I can get this for you, Arlen. Maybe we haven't always had such free and fair and honest elections. LBJ with his buddies posing here with a ballot box after the election. And I think this has been absolutely confirmed as a legit picture of some of the good old boys down there in central Texas, the hill country, with a bag stuffed with ballots, precinct 13 there. A lot of questions about whether that was an honest election. The one that sent LBJ to Actually, Senate. I said Congress, Senate.
Something interesting about that and coincidental about what you're talking about, 1948 election, that's also the election that the Chicago Tribune or whatever it was said Dewey won, when of course it was Truman who actually won the election.
Yeah. Yeah, they got that wrong, but I don't know that they had like looked at some stolen election, stolen ballots, whereas it does appear that LBJ, you can see him right there, second from the right, with all the other good old boys there, including the sheriff far left. Just something to think about. I don't think we have that happen. And LBJ is one of my all-time favorite presidents. Yeah. So I don't know what you do with that information.
He did some great things. Unfortunately, there was a war he had to contend with, and he didn't do so well with that.
Did not handle that well. Let me just put some. This was. I think this is their recommendations, New York Times. Let me see if I can get it, where they're talking about. Did you get those? Did you get them, Arlen? Because I may have had to, I'm not sure this is what the Times said, but I have worked the polls, basically work the polls. Yeah, this is it. Work the polls, watch the polls, don't spread dubious information.
That's what the New York Times recommended, yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that or flesh that out a little bit?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it. People are going to be watching the polls very carefully, watching elections very carefully. So, as long as both parties have an equal chance and, the ability to, check everything once or twice or three times, then it should be okay. It was, like we both agree, it was a decent, respectable election the last time in 2024.
The other recommendation, it's kind of a multifaceted one, but they're saying you should support certain institutions or organizations that are committed to free and fair elections. And I have no problem with that. I think that's fine. If they want to shout out by name, they want to call out the election official, Legal Defense Network. I never heard of them before. I do appreciate the mention here of the Carter Center. I think this is, Jimmy Carter's legacy as an ex-president or former president may be the best of any I'm aware of in terms of all the work he did. Habitat for Humanity, election integrity. He wasn't in it for himself, clearly.
Yeah, there are many organizations that are really on top of all this and doing a good job and talking about it and checking everything. So I think we'll be all right.
All right, Arlen, we're coming up on the end of the program. Before we let you go, any final word, comment you want to promote? thebigpicturereport.com, where Arlen blogs. Well, I just promoted it, but anything in particular you want to talk about?
Just that I'm feeling a little better now that I think Trump is going to great ends to make up things, and seeing his popularity drop makes me feel good. So I'm feeling a little better than I did a few weeks ago.
Are you heartened by the result in that Texas Senate race, Arlen? I would assume that made you feel pretty good. The Democrat winning by 14 plus percentage points, a district that Trump had won by 17 points.
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, that's big. That's sort of some big numbers, and they portend well for the Democrats. And I think that, and of course, that narrows the, the majority of the in the House of Representatives. I think so. Yeah, anyway, those are all good things. And
well, that was actually a state race,
you're right,
state
you're
race,
right.
but it's still important because the Texas legislature is actually relatively narrowly controlled now by Republicans, and every loss there makes a big difference. They have a very narrow majority, and they could lose that, or at least be reduced to a 1 or 2 vote majority, which is problematic for them, obviously, because if they lose anybody, then they lose they can't pass laws. 240-242-5646. Last point I'll just make. Taylor Rennett is the one who defeated Lee Wamsgans in Texas. Wamsgans was endorsed by Trump. And I just want to correct something, and I put this in the thumbnail for yesterday's show. Wamsgans is a woman. Lee is a woman. I thought he or she was a man, but no, Lee Wamsgans is a woman, and she lost.
Yeah, well,
she lost to Rennet.
No matter what happened in that particular one, even if it wasn't a House race, we know that the margin for victory in the U.S. House is very, very small, and it's getting smaller.
Arlen, that's going to do it for today's program. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your being so, I don't know what the right word is. So accommodating, yes, to both my sometimes problematic behavior and also time constraints. We'll be back. I'll be back tomorrow for the free-for-all. We'll have Arlen, hopefully, I'm sure we will, on Tuesday. Thanks again, Arlen.
Thanks, Hal.